It began in the quiet hours of a muggy Manila evening. Keanu Reeves was barely 6 years old. His body still adjusting to the weight of memory and the strange rules of adult life he was beginning to observe in fragments. There was always noise outside, the bark of dogs, the buzz of scooters, occasional fireworks that rattled the glass butt inside. There were moments when silence pressed against the walls so thickly that it made the boy's ears ache. The apartment he shared with his mother and nanny, a 3-room flat tucked in an old building off a busy Philippine road, had a sense of stillness that didn't feel entirely peaceful. It felt like something was holding its breath. Keanu would later recall the place as shadowed and warm, with peeling paint on the walls and windows that sweated from the humidity. The woman was creative, spiritual, and open to the unseen. She burned incense in the kitchen and left bowls of rice water on the balcony to keep things in balance. As she said, Keanu's nanny, Rosa, was more grounded, but she had her own quiet rules too. She never whistled indoors. She always knocked before opening a closed door, even if she'd just closed it a moment earlier, and she avoided the far end of the hallway after dusk. He didn't know what a haunting was. Not yet. A long double-breasted, charcoal gray trench coat suspended upright in the air. Her face was pale and drawn. If you ever see someone standing still and not looking at you, do not speak to it, and do not follow it, she whispered. Sometimes things wear our shape, but something was there, waiting. His mother, Patricia, was a costume designer and often worked late, returning with bolts of fabric or pins in her mouth, muttering to herself about seams and fittings. He called out for Rosa, but the coat didn't move. The moment he turned to run, the light bulb popped, plunging the hallway into complete darkness. He muttered blessings under his breath and sprinkled holy water in the corners of the apartment. He pressed his palm against the hallway wall and frowned. One night, just before bedtime, Rosa pulled Keanu aside. But later that night, she packed a bag and insisted they sleep at her cousin's home across town. But Teresa, still trying to be rational, stayed behind. Keanu was too young to understand, but old enough to remember the weight in her voice. The first time he saw the coat was the beginning of everything. He had been playing with a toy car, rolling it over the floorboards near his bedroom. The hallway stretched beyond him like a tunnel, dimly lit by a single lamp with a yellow bulb. The light hummed, flickering sometimes when the humidity was thickest. That evening, it buzzed louder than usual. When he looked up, he saw a figure standing at the end of the hall, but there was no face, no arms, no legs. It simply hung there, as if someone invisible was wearing it and standing perfectly still. Just a floating, disembodied coat. It didn't move. It didn't sway. Keanu blinked. Once, twice. It was still there. He wasn't frightened at first, just confused. By the time Rosa reached him, he was curled into a ball, crying. The coat was gone. She did not ask him to explain. Instead, she prayed. The next day, a priest came. His robes were a dull, worn black. He whispered something to Rosa that Keanu could not hear. When he turned to look toward the hallway, he felt the breath leave his lungs. The coat stood there, just like before, not aged, not changed. The same impossible silhouette he had seen as a boy. The coat floated across the living room, passed through the edge of the coffee table as though it were smoke. Still, his voice caught in his throat. His legs would not move, not exactly. More like memories, screams, water, wind, watching. Only this time, It stepped forward. The floorboards creaked under its weightless body. The light bulb above burst with a pop, scattering glass. Keanu stood, frozen. Rosa had passed away 2 years earlier, but her daughter still lived nearby. Before he could speak, she said, "It found you again, didn't it?" The coat paused a foot away from him, close enough to see the texture of the fabric, the shimmer of something black where a face should be. Then it whispered, he did not hear words, that people had vanished there before, that Rosa had seen the coat too. He burned sage, though he doubted it would help. A soft rustle, like fabric brushing against the wall. A flicker of movement caught in the corner of a mirror. Rosa's voice, his mother's prayers. And then, silence. The coat turned and vanished into the wall, leaving no trace behind. The next day, he reached out to an old contact from Manila. Keanu called. She picked up. She explained something her mother had kept hidden for years. That the building they once lived in had been built over an old colonial site. The coat was a vessel, she said. Not a spirit, but a shell for spirits too damaged to show themselves. They wore it like a mask. It was drawn to children who could see, to those who could reflect it back. She warned him. It stays close to mirrors. Do not keep uncovered ones near your bed. Keanu went through the house, draping every reflective surface. He never saw the coat again after that night, but every so often, he swears. He hears something in the hallway, and sometimes, when the light is just right, he swears he can see a figure standing at the edge of the frame, waiting. The next morning, her eyes were bloodshot, and she looked as though she hadn't slept. She would not say what had happened. She simply called the landlord and asked to break the lease. They moved 2 weeks later, but the shadow came with them. It didn't show itself again for several months. Not directly. Instead, it made itself known in subtler ways. Doors that had been closed would swing open slowly in the early hours of the morning. He would wake to find the blankets tugged slightly toward the foot of the bed, or the rocking chair in the corner, gently swaying. Mirrors would cloud over with fog, even when the room was cool and dry. Light bulbs would burn out within hours of being replaced. Keanu began to feel eyes on him, especially at night. He started sleeping with the light on. Still, he could see the faintest outline of shoulders, a neck, the top of a head like smoke trapped inside clothing. It did not have a face, but it felt as though it was looking directly at him. Silent, and then, one night, the coat returned. It was standing inside his room this time. Not in the hallway. The air had grown cold and naturally so. Frost began to form on the edges of the window pane, something that should have been impossible in Manila's tropical climate. He stood at the threshold, took one breath, and refused to go further. The coat stood in the middle of the room, but this time, there was a shape beneath it. He screamed. His mother came running, flicking on the lights. The coat was gone. The memories of the coat began to fade, turning into the stuff of childhood nightmares. Sometimes, even things from the other side. But the rocking chair was moving. He chuckled as he recounted the floating coat. The host laughed too. It was late, and he was going over lines for an upcoming role. The house was silent, save for the occasional rustle of trees outside the window. Patricia could no longer deny that something was happening. They brought in another priest. This one did not even enter the room. "This place has been marked," he told them. "It is not the house. It is him." He meant Keanu. The boy listened from the staircase, clutching a wooden soldier in his hand. That night, he asked Rosa if he was cursed. "No," she told him. "You are gifted. You are like a mirror. You reflect things back." But he did not feel gifted. He felt watched. always. The family eventually left the Philippines and returned to Toronto. They moved again, but nightmares do not always remain dreams. In 2006, decades later, Keanu had a rare interview in which he briefly mentioned the ghost story from his youth. But the next night, the coat came back. Keanu was living alone in a large, modern house in the Hollywood Hills. Then came the cold. It swept through the living room like a tide. The fireplace dimmed. The lights flickered.